All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Behind the Visual, where I interview all those people responsible for those images and videos you see out in your world every single day. I am your host, advertising and lifestyle photographer Mark Hansen, and today my guest is Julie Rosenoff. And Julie, until very recently, was the managing art producer at Havas in New York City. So she has a lot of wonderful stories to tell. And we will talk about her time at Havas. We'll talk about the time she was in Italy, where she was taken to a room with no windows and questioned as she was trying to fly out of the country. So a little scary there. We'll talk about her favorite shoot, which was for Jaguar, and that was all over the world. We would talk about producing her first big shoot, which was for Volvo, where she had virtually no experience and not a lot of help. We also chat about how she grew up knowing she wanted to be in advertising, if you can believe that or not, and what she did to make that happen, all those little steps to make sure she got into advertising. Julie also discusses how she finds photographers for shoots, what needs to happen for her to put a photographer in the mix for a shoot, and we discuss a few of the celebs she's met along the way. And we also talk about Julie's plans now that she has ended her time at Havas and what she plans on doing now. So there are a lot of great stories in this episode, some great information for anyone who wants to be an art producer, and also some great info for photographers on this one. So go take a listen. Let me know what you think. Be sure to like it, share it, subscribe it, comment, all those other little things you're supposed to do to push this thing around. So anyway, I really have no idea what all that's for. But yeah, share it, like it, so I know people are listening to this thing. So anyway, thank you guys, and I hope you enjoy this one. Well, first of all, thank you for doing it. So I do want to thank you for agreeing to do this. So that's cool. But let's start off at the beginning. Where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? Were you artistic? What was the whole deal with your childhood? How was that?
So I grew up on Long Island in a town called Valley Stream, which sounds very bucolic.
Yeah.
Um, and it's in Nassau County, so it's kind of like closer to the city than
Mhm.
like, say the Hamptons. And I had a pretty normal childhood. I, went to elementary and high school there. And when I was 16, that's kind of when everything sort of changed. When I was 16, my parents decided to move to Mexico, the country, not the state, not New Mexico, but Mexico. And because I was still a teenager, um, basically what happened is they kind of planned to move there when I was 14. And so they
Okay,
worked.
are they Hispanic or are they
No,
just like
they have,
Mexico?
they have literally no there's no Spanish heritage. There's no connection to Mexico.
Do they speak Spanish?
They did not speak
Okay,
Spanish.
they just like Mexico.
Yeah, they traveled a lot when I was young, my mom and dad. My dad was a veterinarian. And he had his own animal hospital on Long Island, and he decided to sell it when he was about 55. And so that was roughly when I was 16 or close to 16. And so he decided, to go into retirement at 55, or he thought that he would retire. So they had heard great things about Mexico. I think they had a friend that had lived in Mexico City, and they heard about this town called San Miguel de Allende. And that my parents went and checked it out, and they decided that they were going to move there. And because I was, like kind of young, they didn't want me going to college at 16. They thought I should wait. So they wanted me to graduate high school in the state, so I would get a US diploma, high school diploma, but they didn't want me going to college right away. So I took a year off and I moved with them to San Miguel. And I spent this year from 16 to 17 there. And at first I was really unhappy because, I kind of like missed my friends and just missed out on all the things that, you think about, with high school, like prom
Mhm.
and graduation, all that stuff. I ended up graduating at the end of 10th grade. And so I kind of missed out on that stuff. But, with a little bit of time down in San Miguel, I managed to find, a group of friends, and I really had such a great time. I did. I had an excellent time. In fact, I'm still friends with some of the people that I met when I lived
That's
there.
cool.
And I had this love affair with San Miguel. And I don't know if you've ever been. I think you and I
Nah.
spoke. You might have heard about San
Yeah.
Miguel, but it really is a really special place. And so over the last 40 years, because that was in the 80s, my parents have lived there like on and off. Um, so that's kind of, what my childhood was like. From Mexico, I went to college. And I always wanted to work in advertising, always.
Really?
Oh yeah, from the time I was a little kid, I just
What
I
caused that?
I was like addicted to TV.
Okay.
I watched all the shows that I'm sure you probably did too as a kid, whatever. Like after school was, the Brady Bunch and
Oh
Gilligan's
yeah.
Island, and on the weekends it was the Love Boat and Fantasy Island,
Uh-huh.
all, game shows, you name it. So I just love commercials. I always just every time commercials, I just love them. And so I knew that I wanted to work in advertising. Like just there was no question about it. I thought I wanted to be an art director, but because that was sort of the only job that I kind of knew,
Right.
creative. Like I've always been a creative person. So I wanted to go to FIT and
Mhm.
study advertising, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology. I don't know if you know that, but
Yeah.
my parents didn't really want me going to school in the city, like right off the bat, because they thought that I should have more of like a college experience. So
Right.
they encouraged me to go away to school, for like a year and live in a dorm and have that kind of college experience. So I did. I went to a SUNY school called Oneonta, which is upstate New York, and I went there for my freshman year. And I mean, I loved it. I made great friends. I'm still friends with all, these girls that I met freshman year. Um, but the courses weren't there that interested me. I wanted to go to FIT and study advertising, so I ended up transferring. And at that point, I moved to New York. Well, my parents had an apartment in Queens, and at the time my brother and sister were living there, but my sister, she's older, so she had a boyfriend and she was moving out. So I ended up moving in with my brother, and
Okay.
I went to FIT and I got my degree in advertising and communications.
Me
And then
too. That's
great.
yeah.
And then I started working. I just started working.
So where was your first job? Where'd you
So my very first job in an ad agency was while I was going to FIT. It was a part-time job. It was a clerical job back then, like filing.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
so boring. It really was. It was in like in the accounting department. So it was just filing stuff. And basically, when I left that job, and then I went to Wells Rich Green, which was, I mean, back in the day, that was a really well known agency. They came up with the I Love New York campaign.
Oh wow.
Um, they had Chase Manhattan Bank, they had Seagrams, they had some really big clients back then. So I started as an administrative assistant in like account management. Again, not very creative, and it
Yeah.
was quite stifling. So I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with someone in the human resources department. And I said, I need to do something more creative. This is not for me. And she said, well, what about art buying? And I said, what's art buying? I have no idea. So she said, oh, it's, you had a little, they needed an assistant, and they needed somebody with a little bit of accounting experience because, of course, you're dealing with purchase orders and
Mhm.
invoices and things like that. But then there's this creative part to it. And I said, great, sounds great. So I moved into art buying. And I don't know if you know Bev Don, but
Yeah.
Bev Don
Yep.
is, I mean, she was amazing. She was my first boss. And I learned so much in that first job. And that was back when, you know, photography was still analog.
Yep.
I basically went from the department assistant, then I was promoted to stock photo buyer.
Oh,
And that meant, like when anybody needed image searching, you'd call up, all these stock houses don't even exist anymore. They all kind of got absorbed by Getty and
oh
I
yeah.
guess Corbis at one time, but of course Corbis doesn't even exist anymore. But you'd call up FPG or Image Bank or Tony Stone and you'd say, I need pictures of clouds, or trees or beaches or, whatever the subject matter is. And they would messenger over these packages full of slides, either 35 millimeter slides or, chromes,
Right.
2.25, 4.5. And, you'd get these selection of images and count them out and make sure that, what they said they're sending, and you'd share them with the art directors and then just dealing with back and forth, of the slides. Back then, there was no, obviously, like we had computers, but it was still really early on.
Yeah.
So you would fax things to
Mhm.
people, or messenger comps. If there were comps to bid on, you'd literally messenger paper reference of the comps to the photographer's studio so that they could look at it and bid on the job. So it was a really, such a different time back
Oh
then
yeah.
and, compared to now. So I definitely saw the evolution of, photography and just art, production, art buying, negotiating, estimating, all that kind of stuff is changed so much. So yeah, so that's where I kind of made my entree into art production. And from Wellsrich Green, I went to Ogilvy and I worked there for a year. I did stock for the entire agency, which was a huge job.
Wow.
And then from Ogilvy, I went to Ammirati Pierce Lintas. I worked there for a few years. And from there, I went to another agency called Bozell, and I
Mhm.
was there for, I think, a year and a half. And then I moved over to Havas, and I parked myself there 1 week shy of 23 years, basically.
Wow.
23 years. I mean, a lifetime or a lifetime. And I have to say, I mean, I love what I do. I really do. I've always, well, as I said, like I've always wanted to be in advertising. I never knew what art production was, but then once I kind of, found it, I realized that it really was like a perfect match for me. I um I just have a knack for art, like just I don't even have a knack or just an eye, and
Mhm.
over the years, just a trained eye for art and photography. And I just love being able to connect those dots, where there's a concept and then we need someone to bring it to life and just, kind of making recommendations of, artists to, kind of bring it to life and then working with the creatives to find, those people that, whose work that they loved and then, you know, basically producing and making it happen. So I think because of that, I've never really strayed from the industry. It's always been um like a labor of love, I would say. Just every project, it's just a different challenge, right?
Oh
To
yeah.
um working with different people, different subject matter, whether you're in a studio, you're on location, whatever the product is, it's cars, it's alcohol, it's lifestyle, it's pharma, it's food. I mean, you name it, I've worked on it. So
Oh
it's,
wow.
the variety is always, I think, kept it interesting.
Was there one you like more than the other? Like if you had to pick out of all those, what would be the one that you would concentrate on? So if they said you could only pick one of those to concentrate on for now until you are done, what would you pick?
You mean what industry?
Yeah. Like between, like you said, cars, alcohol, lifestyle, pharma.
Probably lifestyle, just because
Yeah.
it's, kind of the most fun.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see that.
yeah, it's just sort of, everything has sort of a different skill set and cars, it's all about location, right?
Mhm.
Location and lighting.
Yeah.
Uh, lifestyles, definitely, I'd say just more variety. But in some ways more challenging. Food's easy,
Mhm.
but it's just really tedious
Foods.
watching somebody with, if the food stylist with the tweezers and like I worked on lean cuisine for years and
Mhm.
you sit there and they're moving like pieces of edamame,
Oh yeah.
strategically placing them. It does get a bit like, watching paint dry.
I did some national packaging one time years and years ago for food. And it was because I'd worked with the art director on something else and she just liked me. And she's like, you can shoot it. It's like, I don't want to shoot it. Here are four people who shoot food that I know are good and will do it. She goes, no, 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 I want to work with you on this. I want to do it. I don't, and it was cheese pull, just like fried cheese being
Oh,
pulled, and
yeah.
don't ever want to do it again. Yeah, don't ask me to shoot food ever again.
I think most food photographers will tell you cheese pulls and chocolate are really
Oh, I
hard to
can see
do.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean,
What was your first, what was the first job you had that you thought was a bigger job that you had that you thought this is great? I've found my niche. I have found what I want to do. Was there one job that you came in and was like, now I'm on the right path?
no,
Yeah.
no, it was a first one. When I started at Havas, I wasn't the head of the department at the time. I was brought in by a friend who was managing the department, and I was going to be her right hand. And but that meant, she worked on projects too. She wasn't just managing. In fact, when I first started there, she was on a shoot in, I think she went to Hong Kong or Paris or probably both. She was gone for a long time. So I started there and I was sort of like on my own, like, what do I do? And I remember we had Volvo at the time. And it was a big shoot. And we were shooting in Miami. And it was probably the biggest job that I had had, to date. And it was super challenging. So I was scared. I was so scared, just
Right.
about messing up. So it wasn't even like that. I have to say, I mean, once we got there, and I think what's challenging about the job is, the onset. Okay, so you're triple bidding, you're negotiating, you're getting the numbers into the right place, and then once you award, then it's like, okay, now you got a whole new set
Mhm.
of issues to work out. It's all the information that's like flowing back and forth,
Yeah.
right? Location scouting. And with cars, you didn't really have, like, in this case, it was more about the cars. It wasn't really about the talent. So we didn't have to worry too much about casting and wardrobe and that kind of stuff. Um, but still, just high profile account, high expectations.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of pressure, and I was really just, so new to the agency, and they were used to people just knowing,
Oh
especially
yeah.
creative, they want you to anticipate what they're thinking, but if you've never worked with them before, it's kind of hard to kind of figure them out. So that
Right.
was pretty intimidating, I would say. Um, so yeah, that was I guess memorable just from feeling sort of not as confident back
Oh yeah.
then. It was, 23 years ago.
Well, based on that, what would you say? Because sounds, what would you say was the most challenging job you had then? Because it sounds like that was pretty challenging since you didn't have any, you didn't really know what you were doing.
Actually,
Was there a job later on that was more challenging than that, or you think that was probably like peak?
more challenging jobs, I would say, or the ones of late. And I think that's because, well, those shoots back in the day were standalone.
Oh
They were, you
yeah.
know, photo focus. That was it.
Right.
Now, I'm sure you know that most productions are integrated.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's two and three rings, going on all at the same time. And those I think are the most challenging when we're sharing the resources. So photo follows motion.
Mhm.
Um, and when you're at the mercy of a production company, when the photographer's at the mercy of a production company and they're given 10 minutes to get a shot or shots, because you got a long list of shots that the client wants, and this all has to fit within the confines of the production, and they like slot you in, you have 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here. And anybody who knows what is required to get a nice shot that can be used, maybe in a print ad or on a
Yeah.
billboard, not just little digital, social
Mhm.
media placements. It takes more than 10 minutes just to get lighting set up.
Oh yeah.
If you're dealing with real people, well, photographer needs a little time to kind of warm up, kind of find the shot. Um, 10 minutes just doesn't cut it
Yeah,
at
most
all.
of the ones I've had, I don't even get a lighting setup. I have to go with whatever video is using, which usually causes me to have to crank my ISO up to match whatever the video, to get the right amount of lighting, which is not always optimal on my end. I'd rather shoot at a lower ISO. Luckily, the cameras are good enough now that if they're printed and they're big, it's usually not an issue. But yeah, and to have that 10 minutes, yeah, you're lucky sometimes if you get 10 minutes.
Right. So I have to say, like, those have been so stressful. Uh,
Mhm.
'Cause all eyes are on the photographer in the moment, and she, in this
Yeah,
case, he, not given not given the time, the space to kind of create what's expected of him. Um, so then it becomes this, like, kind of headbutting with production. Like, I know this is costing money,
right.
but you can't break the set down until we're all happy. And that means
Mhm.
the client, agency and client.
Oh yeah.
So those were really, really stressful
I do
production.
like those if I can make sure they shoot the motion, the video stuff first, because then it kind of the talent, it kind of loosens them up. By the time I get in there, they already basically have, pretty much know what they need to do, and then I just have to tweak them a little bit, so they're a little bit warmed up, which makes it better. But if there's one where I've got to go in there first, then yeah, and they're like, I've got 10 minutes and I have to be the first one in there to shoot,
Yeah.
like it's going to be a lot tougher. But it makes it easier for the video guys. I'm sure they like it better that way.
It's just it's really frustrating because nothing is ever, it's not like clockwork where
Mhm.
they're doing take after take after take. They've, bled into, our little block of
Mhm.
time, and they won't give back the time,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Say you're squeezed even more. So, um, I wish, I kind I get, of course, I get the rationale why, shooting together makes the most sense from a financial
Right.
perspective. Of course it does. But quality wise, it always the stills always suffer.
Oh yeah, we're the stepchild,
Yep.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to talk to the director as much as possible on those shoots ahead of time, so we're kind of on the same page, and he knows here's how much time we have allotted for each shot, and this is my time is here, and so he does his best. At least the ones I've worked with have been nice enough, except maybe one, to do their best to try and get their stuff and allow me at least pretty close to the time I'm supposed to have on there to do it. But it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes you get the directors who are like, this is our show, my show. And then hopefully we have time for you to shoot, when you're done.
Yeah. And, clients, they don't care, right? They want what they want, and you can't blame them for that. It's just hopefully when, I mean, it's probably different at all agencies. I mean, where I was, there was a motion producer and a stills producer, and we worked together. But that's the thing. It's like you really have to be kind of working hands in hand on set. So they get it. They
Oh yeah.
understand
Yeah.
that, as a whole, we all have to succeed here. It's not us versus them, but a lot of times it feels like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so I would say those have been really the most like stressful
Hmm.
because like I said, you're not in charge.
Speaking of, do you think that all photographers needed to shoot motion, need to shoot video as well now, or do you think photographers can get by with shooting just stills and don't have to deal with the motion video aspect of it?
They need to shoot motion.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, it's interesting because Havas is such a big agency. I think probably smaller agencies, one integrated producer would handle both motion and stills, but at Havas, it's just there's one person handling the big motion jobs because they're seeing it through to the
Yeah.
end, the editing and the
I have
post.
noticed that the bigger agencies I've shot for, that's when there's a motion crew and a stills crew. And the
Yeah,
smaller agencies, they come and are just like, hey, we need you to shoot both.
right,
Then you got to figure out how to make that work in the same amount of time as you
right.
would. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it sort of depends too, because now more and more, I mean, obviously this has been the trend for a while, but there were photographers that were doing motion and they call themselves directors. They're really not like
There's a lot to
full
being
up
a director
directing.
besides just
It's just
shooting something.
moving images. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? That's easy enough to do, I
Yeah.
think. But when it comes to directing talent,
Oh, yeah.
speaking to camera, um, choreographing something, that's right, like a whole other genre of motion. And I think that I think photographers or photo directors, maybe that's what I don't even know what
Yeah.
you call them, but kind of work their way up to that. But I think for the most part, if it's online content, it's easy enough.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like full up productions where the stakes are so much higher
Oh,
and
yeah. Because I mean, there's a lot more to it than just what you do on a small social media shoot or just some other thing. Because like you said, there's camera movement, and you have to work with the actors and make sure they know where it's moving, where hit their marks, and talk to them like, "I'll need you looking this way, not add to the camera this way," and all those little things. Yeah, there's so if you just go, I can shoot. I've been directing models my whole life. I can easily be a director. It's not the same. This
right.
is a totally different. Yeah, so I get that. What would be your favorite shoot you've done?
Favorite? Hmm. Probably, I mean, hindsight's 2020 because they were
Yeah.
really, really challenging, but probably I worked on Jaguar. And we shot in France, we shot in Spain, we shot in Italy, most beautiful places, beautiful talent, beautiful wardrobe, like really just really elegant. Um, and I think those were probably the the best shoots that I worked on, but some of the most challenging.
Yeah. Where have you been like throughout your career of 20, whatever, 3 years at
Like for shoots.
Havas? Yeah, where have you been? Or
Um,
where are your favorite places that you've been other than,
I mean, that's funny. I haven't really traveled too much within the United States. I mean, we did a shoot once in Indianapolis. But I feel like it's been, with the exception of Indianapolis, it's been LA, San Fran, um, Miami, and other parts of Florida. Um, and then Europe. I don't think I've never shot in South America, but I know a lot of people do.
yeah.
Um,
So what's your favorite places you shot in Europe?
Barcelona,
Yeah.
great place to shoot. Been there a couple of times. probably Barcelona and in Italy, we were in Rome. And then in, surrounding Rome, but nowhere else in Italy. So
Yeah.
I can't say I have a ton of experience in Europe outside of those three
You ever
countries.
shoot in Portugal?
No.
That seems to be like a big thing all of a sudden. I've
Yeah.
noticed a lot of crews heading to Portugal lately. And I'm not sure why. It
No,
must
because
be cheaper.
they have a good production hub there in Lisbon. So, and the
Yeah,
thing is, you got, a lot of times they want mountains, they want water,
right.
right? They want, maybe city. So you can kind of check those boxes. Same thing with Barcelona.
Hmm.
You can kind of check a lot of boxes by shooting there.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of the same as like with movie crews. They're doing a lot in Budapest now in that
Yep.
area because got
Prague.
everything you need.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about unions. You can
Yep.
run a second unit without calling it a second unit
Yeah.
and paying less money. Yeah,
Yep.
so I can see that.
Prague is like a big production hub. Lisbon has become one. And now Chile, I guess
Really?
Santiago. Yeah, Chile is has become, I mean, it was always like Buenos Aires, right? But now
Yeah.
Chile is a big production hub. And so is Costa Rica.
Oh wow.
A lot going on in Costa Rica. And I think also, you can get a variety of locations there.
Hmm.
It's cheaper. And then of course there's Mexico City,
Yeah.
um,
Does
which
anybody
is
shoot in Canada, or is that just a motion picture thing, or is that like a TV thing?
not for
Yeah.
stills. But yeah, I guess, it's either Vancouver or Toronto.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is interesting because you hear a lot of TV and movies going to Canada, but I very rarely hear stills going
yeah.
to Canada.
Well, the reason why they go to Canada is because of the motion, because it's cheaper, right?
Hmm.
Although
Yeah.
they still have unions there, so you kind of you can't
And I
get
think
away.
you have to use a certain percentage of the crew has to be Canadian, something like that.
So only if you're when with stills, if it's stills only, you don't have to worry about unions. So
Yeah.
that's why it's like, why go to Canada? You don't really need to. But when it comes to motion and talent, yeah,
Yeah. I
um,
see that.
definitely a consideration. All the residuals, I think, is what causes clients to shoot offshore.
Hmm. So
Is it-
have you always done just stills?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. A little bit of motion, but not much. And it's funny because, at the agency, there's so much stills work. There really wasn't a whole lot of time to kind of expand and learn, the motion medium. I mean, I know motion and stills, it's very similar. It's
Right.
really the post that's so
Yeah.
different. Stills post is super easy. I mean, it's retouching.
Yeah.
But with motion, there's just so many more steps involved, and just understanding, files, formats, and um, where it's going to run and that kind of stuff. So that's something that I never really had the time to learn because I was always kind of, bogged down with
Right.
stills only productions.
Yeah, I can see that. So what's your favorite part of the job? Like,
But
so yeah,
job,
what's the part that what was it that caught you and made you like, this is it? I love doing this, and just yeah.
well, I think I said at the onset, I love art and photography. I love photography. I've always loved photography. I've always had I don't know, it's like fascination with old pictures and just looking at all the details in a photo that probably a lot of people don't even notice.
Hmm.
I would sit there and really like just pour over an image and looking at all the details that I could find.
Do you do that with your family
Yes,
and
yeah.
annoy the hell out of them? Because
Well, I mean, just, because growing up, it's funny. My dad, I think, was sort of like an amateur photographer. And so we all had we all had our own photo albums, with all, like our baby pictures all the way up
oh
to
yeah.
12, 13 years old. And so there was always photos to look at.
Mhm.
But then, in terms of art, I don't know where that artistic gene came from, but it's funny because my sister went to school for art, graphic design. So she's really talented. So I don't know, I just always had a not fascination, but I love doing like craft projects, and I've done so many different things. Not, just for me, like
Right.
crazy things, like when I was younger, I would take sneakers and I would literally cover them in glitter. I'd put glue all over and cover them with glitter. I've done, I don't know, so many things that I've made, and I'll be really into making something, and then I'll be over it and on to the next. It's just like I'll have these creative bursts where I'll be all into making something, and then I'm over it.
Yeah.
So, if you came to my house once, but if come another time, I'll show you all the things that I've made. Like, yeah, I made that, I made that, I made, I've
That's
painted
cool.
furniture, I've decorated like lampshades, I just so many different things. But then people will say, like, oh, that's really cool. And I go, yeah, I made it. But it's one of those things where I don't think I could go into business doing this stuff because I would be bored after 5 minutes. So,
Right.
but I feel like this career has, in a way, it's like I am not creating the art, but I'm what's the word? I will find like the perfect artist or photographer for the job, and there's just so much satisfaction in that, in bringing something to life, especially art, because the the different ways to interpret something is just endless, right? With
Yeah.
art. And it's amazing when I'm like looking for somebody, and when I kind of curate a list of artists and say, okay, here's like a dozen, let me know what you think. If you're liking some, you want to see more certain style, let me know. I'll be happy to do more research and share. But when I nailed it, like
Mhm.
kind of the first go, like I love so and so or whatever, I'll be like, yeah, I'm so, like,
Right.
because they're great, and you can kind of just imagine how they're going to bring a concept to life. So that's really like the my most rewarding kind of part of the job, really, is to find the right talent. And even like with photographers, just working with them, whether it's looking at their books and giving them constructive, feedback, and just, how to make, like, improve the presentation,
Yeah.
right? I
So
think
where do you find photographers? Is it word of mouth? Do you go to source books? How's that? How do you do that?
all different places. I mean, so much of it is here in my head just after
Yeah.
so many years. It's bookmarks. I don't even know, like, bookmarks that can go from the ceiling to the floor, just hundreds, whether they're US agents overseas, photographer links as well. So it's a whole mix of just the research that I've done over the years and just kind of kept, those bookmarks. It's using other sources. Like, it could be a source book. I might go on Workbook, I might go on At Edge, I might go on Boulevard. There's so many other, I can go on the book, and
How
like,
often do you actually use those?
um
Because they're very expensive for photographers to get
uh,
in, and I'm hearing from a lot of people that they don't use them very often.
not a whole lot, I'll admit.
Yeah.
Because I'm somebody that has been doing this for such a long time
Yeah.
that I have it all kind of here and, on my computer. But, it's sometimes it's those challenging projects where, oh, we have to find a person in Salt Lake City. Okay,
Right.
so maybe I'm going to start using some of these other source books for that because I'm sorry, but I don't know a ton of photographers in Salt Lake City, but I know
Yeah.
where to look, or it's just something really specific. I don't know. Photographers that shoot people like jumping in the air, for
Right.
example, right? So then I
Right.
might need to kind of go outside and sometimes it's just sparking an idea and then I'll be like, oh, and I'll go down a whole other kind of not rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
just a whole other tangent. And then I'll start thinking about, oh yeah, what about that person? What happened to this person? So
Right.
but in addition to that, I did get lots of promo emails. Couldn't possibly look at every one of them,
Mhm.
but sometimes I'd find somebody there and say, "Oh, I gotta bookmark this site," or I'd have also sort of like a running list of photographers whose work I really liked, and thought like maybe one day,
Right.
throw them in the mix for something. So
Yeah.
yeah,
What's it take for you to do that for somebody you haven't worked with? What's it going to take for you to trust it enough to throw them in the mix and
I
take
need
a chance that
I'll
they're
meet
going to
with
get
them.
booked?
I'll if I get an email, I mean, because nowadays you don't really get anything in the mail, right? Too much. But if I get an email or if an agent reaches out and says, "Hey, check out this person," or if you have time, if I see someone's work that I just think is standout, I'll say I want to meet them. Um, because that's important to me is to have some sort of connection. And
Yeah.
these days, easy enough to have a quick Zoom and spend 30 minutes and get to know them as a person. So for sure, I would do that. I would not put, I mean, I can't say I never did it, but not comfortable putting someone up for a job that I haven't even kind of
Yeah.
had a conversation with. Now, if they're represented by someone, there seems to be a little bit more of a level of comfort because you're
Mhm.
thinking, well, the agent has to have vetted this person. I mean, you don't just, an agent just doesn't like pick somebody up, like meet them
Right.
today and then they're on their website tomorrow. No, there's a lot, I know, a lot of conversations, a lot of back and forth before that actually happens. And then they're like, promoted on the website. So,
Would you ever drop a photographer you haven't worked with into a big job, or you start them on the small jobs, like a smaller job that if it goes bad, it's not going to be that awful?
right. No,
Yeah,
no. I
that's
mean,
kind of what I figured.
listen, I'll tell you this, like I've worked with photographers who had started out, I've been told, now this again, I was there at Havas for such a long
Yeah.
time, but photographers have told me, well after the fact, like that was my first big job. You
Yeah.
gave me my first big job. Well, but they weren't totally unknowns. I mean, they were represented.
Right.
And
But could
so
it be a big job for them is a small job for you, kind of a thing? Could
well,
it be like this is my first big job because it was so many days and so much money for them, but for you it was kind of like, okay, this is more of a $5,000, $8,000 a day gig where for them that's they'd only been making like 2,000 a day kind of a deal. And like this is my first big job, but for you, like, okay, this is a smaller job for us.
I have given some photographers like pretty meaty jobs. A young, not just like out of the gate,
Right.
but
Yeah.
they did some
Well, that's
smaller.
what I meant. Like they start off working smaller, but so to you it's a smaller job, but maybe to them it's a big job, and then it works into what's really a big job. But
Yeah, I mean, well, both. I'd say
yeah,
both because we have hired photographers that had done smaller ones, and then this was a big one for them, and for us too. Meaning, hey, any job that clients are in attendance and you're shooting on location, you got a bunch of talent
yeah.
and wardrobe and all the moving parts.
Hmm.
It's there's it's a big deal. So but listen, these are people that you can tell they got the chops for it. They're not being, I don't want to say propped up, but they've got their production support
Yeah.
behind them.
Yeah.
And, when they have the right crew with them, it's, you're gonna make magic. You will. There's
Oh yeah.
everybody's there with the same goal, right? Just
Mhm.
like make great images and whatever it takes. And that's really, I mean, I gotta say, like photo versus motion, such a difference. Just the temperament, personalities I see and have seen over the years on photo shoots. It's like, everybody will pitch in
Yeah.
to do whatever needs to get done for the success of the job. But on motion, it's a very, very different.
Oh yeah, especially if it's union. Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
this is my job. This is where it
Yeah.
begins and ends.
Yeah,
Like,
right. That light's not working. Why not? Because it's not plugged in. I'll get it. No, you won't. You gotta let
right,
the dude who's supposed to do it get it. Let the gaffer or whatever get it. Yeah.
right. I got to move chairs or sandbags or whatever. I'm fine with that. I don't
Yeah.
care. So it's it's been a great career, I have to say, really.
So what are
Um,
you doing? So now that you're not Havas, what are your plans now?
so I'm just trying to figure that out right now. I kind of I'm exploring a bunch of options. I definitely want to stay in the business, in the
Mhm.
industry, for sure. Um, and I'm just trying to figure out, whether that is on the similar to what I was doing, agency side,
Yeah.
or do I go on the opposite side and become an agent, or, a art consultant, photo consultant, or maybe some kind of combination of the two. So yeah, so I'm
You're
just sort of,
great at consulting, by the way.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
did a great job with my overview page and definitely
Glad.
going to
Okay.
hit you up for a couple other pages on the website. It's probably going to be late December, January, because I've got a lot going on until then. But
That's no problem. I got plenty of time. The last couple of weeks have been a bit of a whirlwind, just a lot going on, of course, with the holidays and the end of the year holidays. But yeah, I'm sort of chipping away, reaching out to lots of contacts that I know, spreading the word, letting them know I'm out there, I'm available, and kind of keeping it open.
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's something out there, and I don't necessarily know exactly what it is yet, but it will be revealed. And I just feel like, I have so much to offer.
Mhm.
And it's just finding the right fit.
Right. Yeah. I get that.
It's exciting. It is exciting. It's a little daunting. I mean, I think, I've been so fortunate that I had such a long run,
Hmm.
at this agency. I mean, it's kind of unheard of, right?
Yeah.
20 years. People don't stay in jobs that
Yeah.
long. Or few do. Few
Yeah.
do.
Not a lot. Yeah. There's so many moving like every 3 to 5 years, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so many people that I've spoken to have been through downsizing and just having to kind of being forced to make a change. And I've been so fortunate. So it is it's definitely an adjustment, but I just sort of feel like, well, I worked really hard, for this company, and now I'm going to take that same energy and attitude, and I'm going to now work for me,
Yeah.
So um, we'll see where I land, but yeah, I'm available for freelance, photo consulting, and even possibly representing. Like, I'm kind of exploring that as well. So we'll see.
Yeah. I can see you being good at that too, for sure. So, what, I guess this would be the last question. What is the strangest, most interesting, most outrageous thing that has happened to you since you got into this business?
Most interesting, outrageous.
And answers have gone all over the place. I mean, to just really out there, to one time somebody said just being asked to be on your podcast. So they're obviously their life could not have been too exciting if that was the biggest thing that happened to them. But I mean, it's been dealing with the mafia to pay off some people for a shoot to,
Oh,
like
you
I
know,
said, that.
well, it's funny. Maybe I blocked this out, but you just as soon as you said mafia, I so one time I was in Italy. It was for a shoot for Jaguar, and I was returning back to New York, and I was carrying hard drives, in my suitcase. And when they x-rayed my suitcase, they were suspicious
Yeah.
of those drives. So I'm sitting at the gate, ready to board the flight, and then I hear my name over the kind of the
Yeah.
intercom. I'm like, oh, I don't know what. So I go up to the counter, and I'm like, I'm Julie. And so they take me like through some, side door, and I end up in like a golf cart, literally like on the kind of like the tarmac. And they take me to this like secret room. Um, and like no windows, right? You don't know what's going on. And there's my suitcase in the room. Meanwhile, they spoke no English.
Ooh,
So, but I knew, like, I kind of knew. I was like, oh shoot, this is what this is.
right.
So they have my suitcase and they want me to open it, and I'm like I don't speak Italian, but I
Mhm.
speak some Spanish, from like the time.
Right.
And I'm basically trying to speak to them in Spanish. I figure Spanish Italian is kind of close, right? So I was explaining to them that I was there for work, that it was, photography, and they're basically like hard drives. That's all. And they let me go. I mean, they had to let me go. It
Right.
wasn't a bomb or anything. But yeah, that was an interesting
Oh, yeah.
incident that happened. But other than that, I think maybe that was one of the craziest things that happened. Then, just like not crazy, but just, fun, like little fun facts, like, people I've met, like Hugh Jackman.
Oh, wow.
Met Hugh Jackman on a shoot.
Was he
Rich,
nice?
um, way back in the day, I crashed a party that Mark Seliger was having. It was when he first like bought his studio
Oh,
on
yeah.
the West Side Highway, and I hung out with Brad Pitt.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, back way back.
Yeah.
um, I'm trying to think who else, and like no one else. Oh, Lionel Richie. So there's been some fun projects along the way. It's just kind of make it a little more interesting, when there's
Yeah.
someone famous to shoot.
So is everybody, all the celebrities you met, were they all nice? Or do you have one that was just
Yes.
like, what a pain?
No, everybody was nice.
Good. That's
Yeah,
good to hear.
yeah,
Good.
yeah. Everybody was nice. I never worked with somebody who wasn't. Sometimes it's the photographer. You know.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
have one photographer that was just difficult, or two or three, or
Um.
you don't have to name them if you want
No,
to, feel free. But
just some that you would say, all right, well, we won't work with that person
yeah.
again.
I don't know that you think you can get by with that these days like you used to be able to in the 80s and the 90s?
Definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think you can be that pain in the ass anymore like you used to be able to be. 'Cause,
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, Julie, thank you.
You're
This
welcome.
is cool.